It was just another ordinary night shift as a security guard. I worked at a small, dimly lit office building on the edge of town, the kind of place that was mostly abandoned after hours. Only a few employees worked late, and even then, they were long gone by the time I started at 10 p.m. My job consisted of walking the floors, checking the perimeter, and making sure everything was locked up tight. The building was older, creaky floors, flickering lights, but it was quiet. So quiet that sometimes I felt like the walls were watching me. The security system was pretty basic, and the cameras, though functional, weren't the best quality. But I never thought much of it. I had worked there for months and nothing had ever happened. That night, though, it felt different. I don't know how to explain it. Maybe it was the sudden stillness in the air or the fact that the wind was howling outside. But as soon as I locked the front door behind me and made my rounds, I felt off. My gut was telling me something wasn't right. I dismissed it as paranoia, probably just the isolation getting to me. But I couldn't shake the feeling. I started on the lower floor, where most of the offices were. The hallways were dark, lit only by the yellow glow of overhead lights that flickered every now and then. I walked around, checking doors, making sure everything was locked. As usual, the silence was oppressive, so much so that the sound of my boots echoing against the tiles made my skin crawl. When I reached the farthest corner of the building, I noticed something strange. The back door, normally secured, was ajar. I froze for a second. It was barely open, but it shouldn't have been open at all. I checked that door before my shift started. I was certain of it. My heart started to race. I stepped closer, listening for any sound that could indicate movement. The stillness was deafening. Slowly, I pushed the door open all the way, half expecting to see someone standing there. But there was nothing, just the empty, dark alley behind the building, and the sound of wind whistling through the cracks. I pulled the door shut and double-checked the lock. It clicked into place, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there. I tried to calm myself down. I must have missed something earlier when I was doing my rounds, I thought. Maybe the wind had blown the door slightly open. But still, something wasn't sitting right with me. I continued my patrol, but now every creak of the building sounded amplified. Every shadow seemed to stretch longer than it should have. When I reached the security office on the top floor, I logged into the surveillance system to double-check the camera feeds. I thought maybe there'd been a glitch or some other explanation for the door being ajar. But what I saw made my blood run cold. There was a figure on the feed, standing just outside the back door. I could see it clearly. Someone in a dark hoodie, standing motionless, watching the building. The camera angle wasn't perfect, but I could tell they were looking directly at the camera. They were waiting. My heart skipped a beat. It had to be a glitch, right? But the longer I stared, the more it felt real. I zoomed in. The figure hadn't moved. It was like they were waiting for something, or someone. Maybe even waiting for me. I grabbed my flashlight and headed for the back door again. This time, with my hand shaking slightly. I couldn't just ignore this. My job was to keep the building secure, and I wasn't about to let some intruder get away with it. But as I got closer to the door, I noticed something even more disturbing. The lock was undone again. It was impossible. I had locked it. My hands trembling now, I pushed the door open just a crack. There was no one there, but the alley looked different. More shadows than there should have been. A cold breeze washed over me, carrying the scent of something foul like wet earth and decay. I stepped outside cautiously, shining my flashlight around. The light bounced off the brick walls, and then I saw it, footprints in the dirt. They weren't my own. Someone had been there recently, and they were watching me. I turned to go back inside, but as I did, I heard something behind me. A soft shuffle, like footsteps. I spun around. There was nothing. Just the empty alley, stretching out into darkness. I should have gone back in. I should have locked the door and called the police. But instead, I stepped farther into the alley, following the trail of prints, convinced that whoever had been lurking was close by. My mind was racing, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I couldn't see anything clearly, just more dark shapes moving in the corner of my vision. Then, something else caught my eye. Movement near the dumpster. A figure. But this time, it wasn't just standing still. It was moving towards me. I barely had time to react. I felt a cold hand grip my shoulder, spinning me around with terrifying force. My flashlight flew from my hand, landing in the dirt, its light flickering on the ground. I stumbled back, heart hammering, but when I looked up, there was nothing, no one, just the empty alley again. I sprinted back to the building, locked the back door, and didn't look back. The rest of the night was a blur. I didn't check the cameras again, didn't even walk around the building. I just sat in the security office, staring at the screen, waiting for something else to happen. It wasn't until my shift ended and I was leaving that I saw something in the corner of the parking lot. A figure standing by the dumpster. It was the same person I had seen earlier. But this time, they weren't just standing there. They were staring directly at me. And the worst part? I could see their face now. But it wasn't a face I recognized. Just empty, hollow eyes staring back at me in the dim light. I've quit that job since then, but I can't shake the feeling that someone or something is still watching. I haven't gone back to that building. I don't even drive past it anymore. But every now and then, when I'm alone at night, I swear I can hear footsteps behind me, soft but deliberate. And when I turn around, there's nothing there. But I know something is still out there. I work as a security guard for a small office building in the outskirts of town. It's not a glamorous job, but it pays the bills. My shift is from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and it's always dead quiet after everyone leaves. The building's old, creaky floors, flickering lights, and an air of abandonment that sends shivers up your spine, even in broad daylight. But night, that's when things get strange. The first few weeks on the job, I didn't think much of it. Just a standard watch through the night. I'd walk the halls, check the cameras, and do my rounds like I was supposed to. But after about a month, that's when things started to get weird. One night, I was making my usual rounds, walking through the ground floor. I passed the old conference room. The lights inside were dim, but they were on, just like they had been the previous nights. I don't remember exactly when the switch happened, but the light flickering, it started to feel almost intentional, like something was trying to get my attention. I stood at the door for a moment, listening. There was something odd about the quiet, like it was waiting for me to move. And then I heard it. Soft footsteps, barely audible, coming from within the room. I froze. I was sure no one was supposed to be there. The entire building had been empty for hours. "Hello," I called, my voice barely rising above a whisper. No response. I walked closer, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. The door was cracked just enough for me to peek inside. At first, all I could see was the empty conference table. The shadows in the room seemed to move in a way that didn't make sense, twisting and bending around the edges of the furniture. It looked like something. Someone was standing there, but the shape was wrong, too tall, too thin. And then the footsteps started again, closer this time. I pushed the door open, heart pounding in my chest, expecting to find someone hiding inside, playing a prank. But the room was empty. I know what you're thinking. Maybe I imagined it, right? But here's the thing. I know what I heard. I swear to God I did. My head was pounding, but I didn't have time to think about it. I just kept moving, telling myself it was all in my head. Later that night, I was at the security desk, reviewing the camera feeds. The building's cameras are supposed to be on a time lapse, but every now and then there's a glitch, a little flicker. That's all it is, just a glitch. But this time, the glitch didn't make sense. I rewound the footage from the hallway outside the conference room, and that's when I saw it, something that made my stomach drop. On the camera, I could clearly see myself walking down the hallway, the usual silence around me. But just behind me, in the corner of the frame, there was a dark shape, moving. It was slow, deliberate. It wasn't a person. Number, the shape was wrong. It didn't have the right proportions. It didn't belong in that hallway. My blood ran cold when I saw it get closer and closer to me on the screen. But I wasn't even aware of it at the time. I knew I wasn't imagining things now. Something was there. I called my supervisor that night. He said it was probably a glitch. Again, that it was nothing to worry about. But when I asked him about the building's history, about any reports of strange occurrences, there was a long silence, a too long silence. And then he just told me to focus on my rounds. That was it. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something wrong with that building. Something in the walls, in the air itself. A few more nights passed. The feeling grew stronger. Each time I walked by that conference room, I felt watched. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I stood in the doorway, staring at the empty room, waiting. And then I heard the footsteps again. But this time, they were clearer, more distinct. The sound of shoes dragging slowly against the floor. They were coming from inside. I pushed the door open again, more forcefully this time, and stepped inside. It was as if the room had swallowed all the light. It felt wrong. Then, in the corner of the room, I saw it. A figure, tall, thin, and completely black. It didn't have a face, no arms, no legs. Just a shapeless shadow standing perfectly still. I couldn't look away. My body was frozen in place. It whispered my name. Not out loud, not like a voice, but inside my head. It was like I could feel it. My heart pounded harder as it beckoned me closer. I don't know how long I stood there. Time felt warped, like the room wasn't real anymore. Something inside me screamed to run, but I couldn't move. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. I stumbled backward, hitting the wall, gasping for air. The lights in the room flickered violently and went out completely. For a moment, everything was black. I was alone in the dark, but the presence, it, was still there. Watching, waiting. I bolted out of that room, ran back to the security desk, and grabbed my things. I didn't even care about finishing my shift. I had to get out of that building. I never went back. But sometimes, I still hear those footsteps in the back of my mind. The sound of something, waiting for me to return. It's been months, but I can still feel that shadow in the room, watching me, waiting. And I know, one day, it'll find me again.